Facebook.
Hey, everybody. I am so happy that you are here with me tonight with the candidate J.D. Scholten, who's running in Iowa's District 4 for the House of Representatives there. Obviously, tonight is a big night in American history. This night will be remembered, hopefully, as a good night, but we know that it's a night that could be dangerous. And so we hold this entire effort to get better candidates in Congress, better candidates in the Senate, and hopefully one day soon, a better candidate in the White House as an extremely important task for our generation. The point of the down ballot progressive candidate summit has to do with the fact that particularly among Democrats, I think, particularly among those on the left, there's always a lot of excitement about the sort of adrenaline driven presidential race, and for good reason, but sometimes not as much attention, I think, to the down ballot races as there should be, when in fact, what could be more important? Congress is a co-equal branch of government. Forgive me if these are things that you know, but just in case you don't remember all your civics from the 7th grade, let me go over a couple of things with you. 3 co-equal branches of government, obviously. Congress is 2 branches, House and Senate. There are 435 members of the House of Representatives, i.e. 435 congressional districts. And it was called by the founders the People's House. And Abraham Lincoln once said, there's not that much evil that any government could perpetrate as long as the people remain vigilant. When he said that, he was referring to the fact that every 2 years, we can theoretically get rid of every person in the House of Representatives and replace them with an entirely new House. Now, because of gerrymandering, that is a lot easier said than done. And also because of this incredible obstruction to our democracy called the undue influence of money. Now, this started years ago when the Supreme Court said that money was free speech, and then it climaxed with what I believe will one day be seen as one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in our history, Citizens United, which gave to huge corporations unlimited power to use their money to influence our political elections. Right now, that is what it is. Given the makeup of the current Supreme Court, I don't think it's reasonable to assume that we're going to be overriding or overturning Citizens United anytime soon. Hopefully, there'll be a constitutional amendment establishing public funding for federal campaigns. Until then, it is what it is, and it takes a lot of money to run for Congress. One of the reasons I'm doing the Progressive Summit is because for those who are Democrats, it's become very clear. There's blue, and then there's blue. There are the corporatist Democrats, and then there are the progressive Democrats. Everybody who is on this candidate summit is a progressive Democrat. Now, some of them are supported by the Democratic establishment. I think that's true of tonight's guest, but I'll be asking him about that. But many of them are not. And so the bottom line here is, if you like what you hear during this summit, if you like what you see when you look at our list of endorsements, and those endorsements, I've made 31 of them so far, they're all on the progressivecandidatesummit.com. You can also see them at mariannewilliamson.com, all my platforms. If you like them, please support them. And please don't think that any amount is too small. With all of you who are watching here tonight, if enough of you give $5, then you know what? J.D. Scholten's going to have a good night. But by all means, give more if you can give more. The point is, whatever you can do to help this man. If your heart says to you tonight, wow, that would be really cool if he was in the House of Representatives, please show it. Please do what you can. And with that, I'm going to introduce you to our first candidate in the Progressive Candidate Summit. And that is someone who I am honored to be able to say has become my friend. And that is J.D. Scholten. J.D., welcome.
Thank you so much for having us, and thank you for organizing this. This is fantastic. Well, and yeah,
I am so excited. And of course, many people who are watching probably know that you came very close to defeating Steve King 2 years ago in the congressional election in Iowa's 4th district. You came, I think, within 3 points.
Yeah. And so, I mean, we started very humbly. We launched this organic grassroots campaign. We're fortunate Winnebago Industries are made in this district. So I bought a used RV, threw our logo on the side, and went to all 39 counties at least 3 times. And in doing so, we moved the needle 23 points, which is the third most in the nation. We outperformed the top of the ticket by 17, and we got 25,000 more votes than there are even Democrats in this district.
So
And the
when
whole reason, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, you
Oh, no,
just said 39 counties. There are 39 counties in one district.
right. We're the second most agriculture producing district in America. So we're very rural. And I mean, we'll talk about this tonight, but there's so much pain in this country right now. But there is pain in rural America right now. And that's a huge part of our campaign.
Well, you know, JD, one of the reasons you've become so well known is because of your progressive take on rural issues and the very idea that rural America, that has been so mistreated by a corporatist conservative agenda, has somehow been propagandized enough to support them, has been really one of the ironies, the tragic ironies in American politics over the last few decades. You have become well known as someone who is speaking. I think this is also true of Mike Royhire, who is a farmer who is running for the Democratic nomination to take on Mitch McConnell. The Senate in Kentucky, really having the progressive vision for rural America. That was when we originally planned the summit. That was the first place I wanted to go to talk to you about. Like you said, there's tremendous pain around America. But I think given the circumstances in America on this night, I think we should start with the more national conversation regarding what's going on with Trump and the protests. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do the summit, as I was saying earlier, is because sometimes we underestimate how much somebody else's congressperson or somebody else's senator really does affect all of our lives. Because you're going to go there as a representative of the people in Iowa's 4th district, but you will be voting as a member of the House of Representatives. You will be voting on issues that affect America and all Americans. So I'd like to ask you, what are your thoughts? We know that these protests began because of a well-established pattern of the execution of unarmed Black men by the police in the United States. What is your understanding of what has happened, and what, if you were a member of the House of Representatives, would you want to see change?
Yeah, so I mean, we got to start with where it started in this most recent part of this, and that's talking about George Floyd. And what is so, I had a college professor that said statistics don't bleed. And so you can read off all these statistics that are very dramatic and traumatic, but until you hear a story or see a story, and America saw that and felt that with him and felt the disgust and just the frustration, and we're seeing that continue on and on. And it's especially for me because I know that area very well. Minneapolis, I lived there for a little bit, and not in that area, but I had friends in that area, and some of those bars that they protest near. I know that, and it's in my heart. I love that town, and my parents and my sister are all up in that area. And so what we're seeing as a what I would say, the one thing that I'm very frustrated right now with how the media is seeing this, they're continuing to show the protest, and they show even the violence of it because it makes for good TV, but they need to be focused on the actual reason why we're protesting, and continually to bring that up. I feel that is something that we really need to push the media on, and saying there's a reason why there are protesters all throughout the whole nation, and it's injustice, it's racial injustice, and we need to continue to fight for equality. And I feel that's a good place to start the conversation.
Well, it seems that as you were saying, we all saw, unfortunately, we saw the man's murder on video, but we've seen others. We also saw Eric Garner. We also know very, very clearly what happened to Philippe Castillo, et cetera. This was the spark that was just too much. And I believe that not only is it George Floyd, it is all the others who, like him, including women such as Breonna Taylor, not just men, but also I believe even accumulated layers of trauma beneath that, that have to do with economic injustice, that have to do with other forms of criminal injustice, that have to do with environmental injustice. And I think more and more white people are waking up to the fact that not only does it have to do with conscience and has to do with the recognition that injustices are being done to our fellow Americans, but I think something has happened, JD. I think people are beginning to recognize that a certain level of economic, environmental, and criminal injustice towards everyone who is basically not 1% of our society has become entrenched. It has become baked into the cake. Now, I don't want to say anything to get you in trouble with your own race, but I am someone who feels that the Democrats as well. Sometimes you look at the House of Representatives, it's not enough to have a Democratic House, and it's not enough to have a Democratic Senate. We need the progressives in there so that we are actually fundamentally changing direction. Would you agree with that?
I do, and one thing I will say though, that like I played minor league baseball, so athletics is in my background, and what I absolutely love seeing right now is the athletic activism. There's so many athletes you're seeing out there, and I mean, a lot of us witnessed the Michael Jordan documentary. It was very popular, but Michael Jordan stayed away from talking about his race, and he had his reasons, I guess, but now athletes aren't afraid to do it. It's a different time, and I love seeing that. We saw one of the Celtics, Jaylen Brown, go all the way from Boston, drive 15 hours to protest in Atlanta, and you see all these on social media, all of it. But then you also see the irony. You see today the San Francisco 49ers did one of those blackout tweets, but then they're the same team that got rid of Colin Kaepernick. And so you see kind of the injustices that are out there.
Yeah. So let's talk about your race specifically.
Yeah.
So today is the primary day in Iowa, and you are unopposed, correct?
Yeah.
For the Democratic race. So you've got this. So congratulations, JD. As of tonight, you are the Democratic nominee for this seat. Now, on the Republican,
this is our celebration. This is our victory party.
That's right, and I'm really excited about it, actually. Okay, so on the Republican side, Steve King, who has been there how many years?
18.
18 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so he is, and I think it's fair to say, a notorious white nationalist. I mean, he himself has said things much so that even the Republican Party has kicked him off committees. And so the Republican establishment, correct me if I'm wrong, the Republican establishment has actually mounted the opponents that are running against him. So you won't know until late tonight, probably, unless your people have told you already, right? You'll know tonight who your opponent is going to be.
Yeah, we expect polls close here in about 45 minutes. And so then, but most of the voting's been absentee, and we've never had that before. So we don't really know how long it's going to take for them to filter, if they've been doing it all day or if it's going to go into the night. So we shall wait and see. It's as far as everything we can see, it's a close race, but I think at the end of the day, I'm not a betting man, but I would put coin on King, just because he's been the incumbent for so long. And so many of these people have voted for him time and time again, and it's just really hard to beat an incumbent. And the other side of it, the challenger, and there's actually 4 challengers, but the main one, I would say the establishment has really gotten behind him, and there's a lot of outside PACs supporting him. And I mean, when you look at the one side, you have Congressman King and all that goes with him, and then on the other side, you have a very corporate friendly candidate who you know what, this district has been hurt by multinational agriculture monopolies. I mean, they are what they are.
I really want to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
I really want to talk to you about this, because many Americans who do not live in rural America don't understand what happened. Now, I think many Americans are waking up to the realization that the corporatization of America has been a very, very bad thing. There's like a corporate matrix of a corporate aristocracy, health insurance companies, big pharmaceutical companies, oil and gas companies, gun manufacturers, food companies, chemical companies, defense contractors, and corporate agriculture. And this is a big deal. And it not only affects the people in districts such as yours, but it affects all of our food. It affects the earth. So lay it on us. Tell us what happened and tell us how you're going to fix it.
All right. So one of the things I've been running on for all last cycle and this cycle is enforcing our antitrust laws in agriculture, because you look at where we were 100 years ago. And in fact, when Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle in 1906, we are more concentrated now than we were back then. So when I was born,
I'm already depressed with what's going on. I can't believe what you just said.
Yeah.
My goodness.
And so when I was born in 1980, there was 34% of the market was controlled by 4 companies, and that is not a monopoly. They say when 4 or less corporations control 50%, that's the monopoly level. Well, right now in our beef industry, 4 companies control 85%. So what that means is they can set the price on consumers, and they can fluctuate with a little resistance. And they pay their workers relatively low, and then they really, the biggest issue is they're squeezing the farmers, and they're price fixing our farmers out. And so we're at the point now, you see how globalization has affected the factories and the working class. It's the same thing in agriculture, and we're becoming dangerously close of losing our local agriculture by shipping it out for a cheaper price. And yeah, that's a good start.
It was a mayor in a small town in Iowa who said, before the 1980s, if a farmer had a bad year, he'd go to the local bank, and the local bank would say, though you had, you'll pay us next year, your yield will be better. And then with the corporatization came banks who were on the sides of the major corporations, so that people who have had farmland that's been in their families for decades, sometimes even longer, no longer can afford to be on that land. We know that we've started to see a lot of suicide among farmers in America. This is a tragic situation. There was something, a show, I don't know if you saw it, it was very good a few weeks ago on 60 Minutes about this. Did you see it?
Yep.
And they talked about how many of the people who are controlling what's going on in agriculture in places like Iowa have never even been to that land, have never even walked that land. It's just a far off financial commodity to them. No reverence towards the land, no reverence towards the food, no reverence towards the environment. And you might not say it, but I can say it, this is killing us.
Right. Well, and so here's 2 stats that I like to tell people who aren't from Iowa that are kind of eye-opening. 1, 90% of the food that we consume here in Iowa is imported. We have all this great land.
Explain to me, it's so insane, but explain to me why that is.
Well, we've gotten so concentrated that it's all about international trade and get bigger, get off the farm policies for decades.
And Senator Perdue, who is our secretary.
Well, that's a whole different thing. Yeah,
but this actually say get bigger,
right.
Go
get
away.
off. Yeah. And he said there's no promise that the small farmer can stay in existence, and that was mostly dealing with the dairy industry, which has its own struggles. But so one of the things that I want to do, and this is for pennies on the dollar, is invest in regional food system that we can have. If we have farm to school, farm to prison, farm to nursing home, farm to hospital, farm to military, and if we create that's only 20% of our national production in agriculture, but that's a game changer. And that could, it's better food, local food, and also it would be a huge step forward in revitalizing rural America, because it would create a lot more flexibility, adaptability. And if we're going to be a secure nation, we need to be a food secure nation. And in order to do that, we've seen there's been a spotlight with this pandemic on our food system. And we are so concentrated that if there is a break in the system, it affects the whole market. And that's what I'm saying is we need to decentralize. We need to enforce our antitrust laws, decentralize the food system, and then also for pennies on the dollar, invest in a regional food system.
Let me ask you, I read somewhere that a lot of America's farmland is now owned by foreign sources. Is that correct in Iowa as well?
So not in Iowa. It's against the law in Iowa, but in other places. I mean, you look at China, they own
I was
over,
that word.
China owns over 400, and the irony in all this too are the same people who are talking about America first has sold out. And especially you look at Congressman King, he is as guilty as anybody. And you look at Smithfield, they're a multinational corporation. They're owned by China Pork. So 1 in 4 hogs in the United States is owned by China. China owns over 400 farms and over 33 meat processing plants. And when I talk to a lot of these hog farmers and hog producers, and you got to understand, a lot of the people who actually put the dirt under their nails and do the work, they're handcuffed. These multinational corporations are squeezing them on the input side, they're squeezing it on the market side, and squeeze it on how they actually farm. But I ask every hog farmer when I meet them, I go, how did you do in 2017? And almost all of them will say, at best, they made cost of production, at best. And then I go, well, the CEO of China Pork made $291 million. That's more than Elon Musk. That's more than Tim Cook at Apple. So
It's heartbreaking, actually.
Yeah.
It's more than dysfunctional, it's heartbreaking. I was also told by rural mayors on my presidential campaign that before the 1980s, when rural mayors needed help, they needed help to make sure they had sewage systems, to make sure they had schools, to make sure they had roads, to make sure they had hospitals, to make sure that they had all the infrastructure that would make for people wanting to come in, start their families in small town environments, and that before the 1980s, the government would not only give them low interest loans, but would include with those low interest loans a lot of grants. And that starting in the 1980s, that stopped.
I don't know about that. I would have to do some research into that, but that sounds pretty accurate. Yeah, there's one more stat I wanted to get in. The apple juice, and this is the other stat that I like to tell people that their eyes open. 60% of the apple juice we consume in America is made in China, and think about the environmental aspect of shipping all that over here.
So wait a minute, wait. But there are apples?
No, I think it comes from, I don't think we ship it there. All I know is that the concentrate is made in China and then it gets shipped over here. And I just look, even though apples aren't a thing that people associate with Iowa, there's a bunch of orchards around. And just think of if we just focus. And the other thing to remember is that almost all agriculture is policy driven. It's all policy driven. The international trade, it's all policy driven. So we can create the future that we want, but we got to get people in Congress who are willing to not just do the status quo, but we have to look out for our communities, our rural communities, our farmers, and our environment.
And the point, of course, is that they support the status quo because the status quo means they're donors, means the economic influence, the undue economic influence of these huge multinational corporations, in this case, particularly agricultural corporations, which have actually turned our Congress too often into a system of legalized bribery, which is why people like us need to support you. And I want everybody who's listening, please remember, go to Scholten for Iowa, SCHOLTEN, numeral 4, Iowa.com, and give whatever you can. It's going to be a tough race.
Yep.
Lost by only 3 points last time. The Republicans are looking at that race and they're going, we got to be careful. He's a rock star, which you are. People all over the country know about him, and they're gonna put up a big fight, aren't they?
Yeah.
This race, yeah.
Right.
And we got to do. Yes, you were saying.
Well, and we are a people-powered campaign. We don't take corporate PAC money.
I don't think any corporations really want to support you. A lot. Anyway, but you got us. You got us.
Exactly. And that's it. I got people, and the history of this district is actually pretty unique because two of my political heroes are Tom Harkin, who became senator, and a guy named Berkeley Bedell. And Berkeley Bedell just passed away at 98. And He ran, and on his 1982 reelection poster, I have it right here, and it means the world to me. So it's his 1980. Remember, 1982. Does the 1% now own your government? Does the 99% have a chance? How can we rescue our democracy? 1982. And those two gentlemen represented what is now the 4th District, about 80% of it from the mid 70s to the 80s before Senator Harkin went on to run for the Senate. So,
Well, a lot of these problems that are now stage 4 cancers, I remember when they were stage 1 cancers, and I remember when the conversation was already there. We have a couple of women who want to ask you questions. When we come back, I want to circle back to the race issue, because I want to know what we're going to do to change things. And also, of course, I want to talk to you about the president and what's happening now. But is that okay with you if we go to a couple of questions?
Absolutely.
Okay. So there is a woman named Melissa Haley, and we're bringing Melissa on. And Melissa's going to ask you a question. And hi, Melissa, how are you?
I am great. How are you?
Great. Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Lay it on JD Scholten and let him hear your question.
Okay. So JD, as you know, immigrants are an integral part of our community here in Sioux City. They are the backbone of our meatpacking industry in Iowa, and some are providing this service undocumented. During COVID-19, these hardworking individuals have been deemed essential workers. The truth is that they have always been essential to our community in Iowa. I would like to know what steps specifically you would take to ensure a quick and clear pathway to citizenship for these essential, hardworking members of our community.
That's absolutely, I mean, that's a great question. And
Thank
it's
you,
the irony that Steve King is our representative, because it's so far from the truth of what we need in this district. When I first went to all 39 counties and started talking with people, in Jefferson, Iowa, the grain elevator down there needed 39 employees for their harvest, and they didn't get one American citizen to apply. And when I went to Storm Lake and had my first town hall last cycle, a woman came up to me and she said, I just became an American citizen. It took 17 years and $17,000. And I think that part of it doesn't get discussed enough. We're way behind in the judiciary and having enough judges to process all this. It takes years and thousands of dollars, and we gotta shrink that up. For DACA, we absolutely gotta pass the DREAM Act to protect them. We need, I think there needs to be a step between citizenship, though. I think there needs to be a residency first, so these people can work, and if they choose to continue to be a resident or a citizen of wherever they come from or wherever they're born, that's fine. But then also they need to earn the right to become a citizen. And so I think those are the steps that we need to do. Our immigration system is so broken. It is just so disheartening, and is, I mean, it goes into, I feel it's part of all this that's happening right now. It's part of the national the frustration and the kids in cages and all the heartbreak that we saw down at the southern border, and we really need to come out of this and have a humane immigration system.
Well, also, it's very connected, of course, to the whole white nationalist threat, because many of these immigrants in districts like yours are from Somalia. Is that correct? Somalia.
Some of them are, yeah.
So we're talking about people of color in many instances, which takes us back. Are you satisfied, Melissa? How did he do?
He did wonderfully.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So that takes us back, of course, JD, to the issue of what's going on, George Floyd, the protests, et cetera. What are the changes that you want to see made, and what would you stand for as a congressperson? Oh, I lost my.
You're still on. I'll say that.
Yeah.
I can't see it, but I'm glad to know I'm on. Okay.
Yeah.
What are the changes that you as a congressperson would want to stand for
Yeah.
in terms of our criminal justice system and what's happening, particularly with the horrible statistics? A person of color is statistically likely to get a 20% longer prison sentence than someone who is white for the same crime. We know that drug use among whites and blacks is roughly the same, but a black person is much more likely to be arrested and tried. And that is not even to mention the obvious problems we have with police brutality. What, as a congressperson, would you be standing for?
Right. I mean, so much of this I view through the lens of the 4th district, and the reality of the 4th district is we are 91% white. And one of the things that, being an athlete when I was younger, I was disproportionately around people of color far more because I traveled on baseball teams, basketball teams. And so I have a different point of view, I think, than a lot of people that I grew up with because of that. And I'm blessed to have that. In this, I guess, I want to focus more on or I'm going to, my answer, I think there's a big national answer, and then I think there's a local answer. And my local answer goes back to enforcing our antitrust laws. These jobs at these meat packing plants that, when I was a kid, when we moved here into Sioux City in 1984, that was a good job. You got paid $16 an hour, and then they de-unionized, and now they went immediately from $16 an hour, they went to $5 an hour, and then they've been creeping up, and now we're back up to $16 an hour. And the people who are getting tested and testing positive for the pandemic and COVID-19 are predominantly in these meatpacking plants are people of color, and this is part of it all. These multinational corporations are so focused on giving their stockholders money and the profit, and we quit valuing work and the working class. And I think when we talk about racism in America and how we're going to combat racism, we got to talk about the economic injustice that's happening in America as well. And I think that's a huge part of moving forward in racial.
Well, during the last 40 years, of course, the American corporation is so disconnected from any ethical and moral center. As soon as it became the social and political consensus that their only responsibility was fiduciary responsibility, short-term profit for their shareholders, then they were made to feel no ethical or moral consideration for the planet or for the people. Right. Or for the animals, because the animal issue and care for animals and CAFOs, et cetera, all of that is a very big deal in Iowa. And there's a huge national desire to see more compassionate treatment towards animals.
And one of the things that I really want to see is for the Democratic Party. And that is, we can shape it. If we get people in Congress, if we have a stronger voice and we're going towards that way, but we got to keep on going. We need to, I feel, have a Dollar General coalition. And I say that because in my district, almost the majority of small towns are struggling to keep their local grocer alive, and Dollar General's coming in and undercutting them. And so that means the money you pay to Dollar General goes to their headquarters or Wall Street. They pay their workers $8-9 an hour. They don't sell fresh produce. They don't sell fresh meat, and it's hurting this district. But that same pain, when you go into some of these urban areas that have food deserts, it's the same thing. And
absolutely, and that's a large part of our healthcare system. As I said during the campaign, we have a sickness care system. We have such a higher level of chronic illness among Americans and among people in other democracies of comparable wealth. And a large part of it, of course, has to do with the diabetes. A large part of it has to do with the chronic heart disease, has to do with the obesity, much of which comes from what you just said. Even in states where we're with a food basket, we're not giving a nutritious food, providing nutritious food for the people even who live there. And for the reasons that you said. So I want to bring Astrid Escobar on because she is someone who has a question for you, another question for you. So let's bring on Astrid Escobar, and then I will ask you a couple more questions before I let you go. Astrid, hi. Astrid Escobar, thank you for being with us.
So I guess my question would be, recently and throughout this presidency, we've seen a lot of inflammatory statements coming out of the White House. And Marianne, you touched on some of the racist rhetoric that Congressman Steve King spews. So my question would be, how do you go about healing in the 4th District? And like, that's something that's incredibly important for me, just as like a minority that has been demonized and has, watched a congressman demonize like people of color. So.
Yeah.
Go for it, JD.
Okay, and I think this also goes into what we were talking about, and how I said there's the 4th District problem, and then I think overall as a nation, I think when we talk about especially the amount of people of color who are disproportionately hurt by a lot of our policies, you talk about we should end cash bail, we should not have mandatory minimums, we shouldn't definitely not have private prisons, and we need to have these police officers held accountable as well. And so those are some of the things that, sorry, I had a little gnat, but those are some of the things that I feel that's part of the pain that people are feeling. And we're not there's not one policy that's going to solve all this. That's, I think we all understand that, but we got to take steps in the right approach. And again, it gets back to the pain in this district stems from corporate America sucking out the wealth of this district. And I think reversing that and investing in areas of people of color or in rural America, I think is a huge, huge part of how we can start healing this country.
Was that okay, Astrid? Did he do okay? Did he answer your question?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much. So President Eisenhower, JD, said that the American mind at its best is both liberal and conservative. And I know you have a lot of conservatives. Steve King, you've had a Republican congressman there for 18 years, obviously a lot of Republicans. And it seems to me today, really the dichotomy is not left versus right. It's conscience versus heartlessness. And I don't feel that any socioeconomic group or even any side of the political spectrum has a monopoly on moral values. People are understanding today, whether they're on the left or on the right, conservative or liberal, Democrat or Republican, that something is off with our hearts. And with that is something's off with our dedication to democracy itself. So I know that you have a race where you have to be someone who is considered trustworthy by both Republicans and Democrats, because you won't win your race unless there's some Republicans who vote for you, who feel that you do represent that kind of moral center that is the most important thing that we go back to now. I have felt sometimes that Republicans don't talk their walk, but that Democrats don't talk their walk. Everything that you said here tonight about the kind of corporate tyranny, really, that has hurt so many farmers and so many people in rural America because of these huge, gargantuan, faceless corporate entities that have more control over people's lives than they have over their own lives. What is the stance? And that's really what I think America is really longing for right now. We have a president who speaks to his own base as though he's not the president of anybody else. I think that that's what people are longing for now. Someone who is standing on the best and the angels of who we are. I have known you for a while, and I know you to be someone who dwells within that ethical center. That has been my experience of you as an honorable man. And just before I let you go tonight, I'd just like to hear from your heart. A little bit about what you would like the people, not only of your district, because remember, people are watching this summit from all over the country, but we want them to know, everybody to know, even beyond the sort of crass political part, guys, we need the House, the Democrats need to win the House, all that. Even beyond that, what do you stand for? What are you bringing to the table? Why is America going to be a better place because you are a member of the House of Representatives?
Yeah, well, again, thank you so much for allowing me to speak here. And one thing that's really popped up in my mind in the last week is Proverbs, a verse from Proverbs says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed." And ultimately, the whole reason I got to run initially is my grandmother, right after the 2016 election, I wanted to get more active, and I didn't know what that meant. And my grandma's my inspiration in my life. She was everything. And on her deathbed, she goes, "JD, you need to move back to Iowa and take care of the farm." And so when I moved back to Iowa, the best job I could find was $15 an hour with no benefits. So I created my own job, and in doing so, I was on the hook for my own health insurance. And then for about a month, there was nobody in this race on the Democratic side. And I couldn't let Steve King go unopposed. And so we launched very humbly last time. And what I did was I got on my campaign RV, went to all 39 counties, and just really talked to anybody and just welcome everybody to the table. It doesn't matter if you're white, black, or brown. Doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, Independent, Republican. Whoever you are, we invited you to the table, because that is democracy. And we may not agree on everything, and that's all right. But at the end of the day, you know where I stand, and you know my ethics and my morals. And that is how we move the needle, and where we started from absolute scratch to where we ended up. And we picked up right where we left off. And our organic grassroots campaign in Western Iowa has just grown and grown and grown. And here we are. Tomorrow morning, I'll wake up in the general election, and we are ready to go. And so that's where we're at, and just that's where my heart's at. And everything I have in my life, I'm not a man of wealth. I'm a working class candidate. And just everything I have in my life, I put into this, because at the end of the day, it's not only our farm, it's all my neighbors' farm. It's this district. This district has been abandoned, and we need a vision for it. And that's, at the end of the day, that's my passion and why I'm doing this.
That was beautiful, JD. And I know that your grandmother is so proud of you, would be so proud of you. And wherever she is, she's so proud of you. You know, I recently moved to Washington, D.C., and it's a beautiful city. And it is filled with a lot of big buildings, where obviously a lot of powerful people must be in those buildings, because they're big, beautiful buildings with lawyers and lobbyists, etc. And I said to my friend the other day, a lot of really powerful people must work in these buildings. And I said, who represents the people? And she said, well, the NGOs and the nonprofit organizations, which, as we know, have a fraction of the financial influence and leverage in Washington that these major corporate entities do. But as I walked down the street, I was so aware, well, that's what Congress should be. That's what Washington should be. That's what the White House should be. And when I think of you in the House of Representatives, I think of the House member who really is there for the people. And I have always believed, and anybody who hears you speak is so clear, that your heart connection to the people of Iowa, to the people of your district, and to people in general is so great. And it's that level of compassion, that level of heart, that level of ethics and real moral certitude that I believe America is hungry for right now. And I wish you the best. It's very exciting. I want to congratulate you, because really, technically, as of tonight, you are, once again, the Democratic nominee for the congressional election, House of Representatives, Iowa District number 4. And regardless of who your opponent will ultimately be, I hope that everybody who was listening here tonight, and I hope that you will share this recording. I hope you will tell your friends. I hope that you will do everything that you can to support J.D. Scholten in Iowa 4. And once again, Scholten for Iowa, SCHOLTEN, numeral 4, Iowa, obviously Iowa, IOWA.com, ScholtenforIowa.com. Try to do this before midnight tonight, because of the way all the legal ramifications are of what's, during what period of FCC filing your money came and so forth, will be of greater value to him. JD, congratulations. All my very, very best to you. And thank you so much. I'm so honored that you would be here with us for the summit tonight, because I know it's a big night. And to all of you who are watching, thank you for joining in this conversation. Remember, an idea is stronger when it is shared. And we are going to be increasing this conversation for a whole week, possibly beyond. Tomorrow night, we will be talking to Andrew Romanoff, and he is running against John Hickenlooper for the nomination to be the Senate candidate, the Democratic Senate candidate against Cory Gardner. The Democrat is very much favored to win, but the difference is between whether you have the corporatist candidate or the progressive candidate. Andrew Romanoff, John Hickenlooper, I met him during the presidential campaign. He's a nice man. But to give you an example of just where his consciousness is about things, whereas Andrew gave a passionate talk about Black Lives Matter, Hickenlooper responded with some of that all lives matter talk that we know we need to move beyond right now in order to get to the heart of the problem. So I'm very excited to have Andrew Romanoff on. On Thursday night, Julie Oliver in Texas. Texas is on the move. Texas is on the move. You might know that I was born and raised in Texas myself, and we're already moving into the purple zone in Texas. When I was raised, it was the Democratic state when I was growing up. So it's very exciting to see and to hear from Julie Oliver. That will be Thursday night. Friday, one that's gotten a lot of attention, and that has to do with Shahid Buttar in San Francisco, who of course is running against Nancy Pelosi. I have a lot of respect for Nancy Pelosi, and the Democrats have got to move on now. We've got to have some new energy. We've got to have some new consciousness. We've got to have some new ideas. Like JD, like all the people here, Shahid Buttar is a rock star, and you're going to want to hear that. That's Friday night. Saturday, Robin Wilt, please be here. Robin Wilt also, because she's an African-American woman. I think a Black woman giving her thoughts about what's happening in America today since the George Floyd murders, et cetera. I'm very, very eager. She's a fascinating candidate, very exciting, very important. Really excited for you to meet her and hopefully support her as well. On Sunday, we will be talking to Shan Chowdhury, also in New York, a wonderful candidate and worthy of being heard, deserving of being heard. And then Monday, Jen Perelman, who is running against Debbie Wasserman Schultz in Florida. So it's a new day. I don't need to tell anybody. We're in a crisis in this country. We have this pandemic. We have what is happening now. Let's in our hearts hold blessing and protection for all the peaceful protesters. You know, I live here in Washington. As I mentioned yesterday, I was at the White House, not at the White House, but with the peaceful protesters in front of Lafayette Park. And I'm telling you, it was peaceful. It was just people gathered. I left about an hour and a half before the president came through, and the group was tear gassed. But unless things really, really change, and how could they have been violent? What was there to loot? There aren't any stores around. Let's pray. Also, as I posted tonight on my Twitter page, during the Battle of Britain, the British people took a minute of silent prayer, a meditation and focus at 9 p.m. every night. And I suggest that we do the same at 7 p.m. wherever you are. Let's pray for our country, and let's pray for our world. God bless you. Thank you so much. Thank you, JD. I wish you the best. And to all of you, thank you for being here. Hopefully, I'll see you tomorrow night. Bye-bye.